Shapeshifters are some of the most skill-expressive champions in the game due to their ability to switch between two distinct forms, usually range and melee. They've also been recognized for their extreme carry potential when mastered, as evidenced by Jayce, Nidalee, Rek'sai, and Elise being quite popular in higher levels of play. You would think the same would apply to the likes of Gnar, who also has a range form and melee form, with the latter having some of the most devastating all-in pressure out of the entire cast, especially in teamfights. Gnar has had moments of fame throughout his 8-year lifespan, but most of that was consolidated into the first half from 2015 to 2018. Aside from a couple months in 2021, his play rate has significantly decreased, devolving from a staple top laner into a mediocre pocket pick you see every so often. And while I and probably many other top laners are glad he isn't played so often because he's one of the most annoying top laners in the game, it begs the question, why? For today's episode of Why No One Plays, we're going to be looking at Gnar, the missing link. Now, I'm sure you guys may have heard of the recent cybersecurity attacks to Riot Games where the source code for TFT was exposed, so to promote more awareness of keeping your information safe online, that's where a sponsor for today comes in, Aura. Aura can identify data brokers that are exposing your information and automatically submit opt-out requests on your behalf. That includes stuff like junk mail and telemarketing lists. They also monitor your emails and passwords to see if anything has been involved in a data breach and exposed to the dark web by giving you recommendations on what to do. To further compound your security, the app features a VPN, password manager, real-time credit and identity theft monitoring, parental internet controls, and device malware protection. It's a very convenient all-in-one program that helps maintain your privacy online from hackers and trackers online. If you're interested in trying it out, head on over to aura.com/varsverum for a 2-week free trial. Thanks again to Aura for sponsoring the video, but for now, let's go back to why no one plays Gnar. Distinguishing himself from other Transformers, Gnar operates in a slightly different manner than that of Jayce, Nidalee, Elise, and the like. While his predecessors forfeit a standard ultimate in favor of an extra set of basic abilities, Gnar does have an ultimate, a super ultimate at that. So how does he transform? Through his passive, Rage Gene works like your typical Fury mechanic. Dealing or taking damage causes him to build up rage over time, accelerated when fighting against champions. At max rage, he can use one of Mega Gnar's abilities to transform into him, or after 4 seconds, he does so automatically. Other shapeshifters merely switch from a range to melee status and vice versa. No significant alterations, if any, are made to their base stat line. Gnar, however, changes so much that you'd be hard-pressed to call them the same champion, at least if we go by parameters. Mini Gnar has higher base movement speed, base attack speed, and is a ranged champion. Mega Gnar has significantly higher base health, armor, magic resist, and attack damage, and I believe he has the highest base stat total out of all champions in the game. The transformation to Mega Gnar lasts for 15 seconds, reverting back to Mini Gnar afterwards, and being unable to generate rage for 15 seconds. To account for the bulk of Gnar's pressure being dormant in his melee form, the win condition is obviously to access that melee form as often as possible, and so his mini form was designed to allow him to safely accumulate rage. Being very auto-attack and poke-heavy, Mini Gnar plays like a traditional Yordle. He's evasive, does hit and run, and is a nuisance in general. He's one of the most difficult top laners to engage on thanks to Hop, being able to dash up to almost 1,000 units away, and Hyper giving him a substantial movement speed buff upon activating his 3-hit passive. When transformed, Mega Gnar plays like a diver, jumping into the enemy team and exploding everyone to pieces with his massive area coverage and base damage. His notoriously powerful engage has well earned a spot in the top 10 or even top 5 most threatening all-ins even to this day, being able to single-handedly do more than 2 or possibly 3 champions worth of initiation combined. To put things into perspective just how brutal Mega Gnar is, let's take a look at the numbers. At max rank, Boulder Toss does 205 base plus 140% total AD in damage. Ordinarily, when you see an AD ratio that's over 100%, it would be bonus AD or attached to an empowered auto attack. And also remember that Mega Gnar has the highest base attack damage in the game, not counting the items he builds. So that 140 is being put to good use. Continuing on, Wallop is 145 base plus 100% total AD, and his ultimate deals 600 base plus 75% bonus AD, as well as 150% AP for some reason. Might explain why Silas mains love Gnar so much. Packing it all together, that's 945 plus 75% bonus AD. Assuming the average Mega Gnar at level 16 has 3 AD items, that will bring him to about 300 total attack damage, 150 of that being bonus. In total, that's just over 1750 damage accompanied by a chain stun lasting 3 seconds that can theoretically damage all 5 members of the enemy team. Gnar's a beast, literally. His monstrous all-in pressure sets him apart from other Transformers who don't have the most threatening engage. With his mini form being really difficult to catch and his mega form being really difficult to handle, it makes her a very devastating combo. The only thing that keeps him in check is that he can't store his rage indefinitely and has to transform when he caps out. If Gnar could switch to Mega at will, he might just be the best top laner in the entire game, but therein lies the main reason why people don't like playing him. Gnar's transformation is impossible to plan ahead of time in a landscape where game-deciding teamfights happen at the drop of a hat, and with so much of his power budget attached to that transformation with no way to preemptively stack it, it comes down to sheer circumstantial luck whether or not you'll have your Mega form when it really matters. It's a lot more doable in laning phase when the pace of the game is slow and you only have one opponent to deal with barring ganks. Like I said, Mini Gnar is designed to be as difficult to catch as possible, so you can slowly poke down your lane opponent and then go for short trades or all-ins once you transform. The situation drastically changes once we're in the mid to late game. Like Renekton or Tryndamere, Gnar isn't allowed to preemptively build rage and sit on it for very long. After 13 seconds of being out of combat, he starts losing it. So it's not like you can get to 90% rage and then wait for a teamfight to get the last 10. Additionally, you won't always have minions or monsters to stack up rage during late game. In the early game, you can make liberal use of your Mega form since you'll have access to it very often. There's a high probability that unless you're continuously poking the enemy team with your boomerang, you'll be starting a teamfight at or close to 0 rage. Let's go back to the Haunter clip I showed earlier. That 5-man Gnar ult was the outcome of several things happening at the same time. For starters, TSM was already in the midst of sieging the inhibitor turret, giving Haunter plenty of time to either attack minions or throw Qs at Flash Wolves. Then, once the tower went down, Bjergsen went for an AoE stun, prompting Flash Wolves to retaliate by throwing Sejuani ultimate at Doublet, who QSS the ult and jumped away. Then both teams haphazardly tried to attack each other, not really wanting to go for a full YOLO engage. After everyone burned their ultimates and a good 5 seconds passed, Haunter finally engaged for that legendary 5-man Gnar ulti. Notice how during that entire time, no one was attacking him, he was just free firing and dancing around the edge of the fight stacking up rage. So many things had to go in his favor to pull this off. This almost never happened in solo queue. Pro play is far more methodical, slow, and steady. It's a 39-minute game with only 8 kills on the board. You will rarely have a situation where your team is sieging tower and the teamfight lasts for more than 10 seconds. Bear in mind, this was in Season 7 at the tail end of tank meta. Having no circumstantial agency over when you can stack up your rage is the single biggest deterrent for playing Gnar, as it makes him very inconsistent. Consistency, or lack thereof, can damage a champion's reception even if they're really effective in spite of it. Skarner, for example, is a criminally underrated jungler. His single target lockdown is one of the best, and his damage output isn't half bad considering he usually goes full tank. But players just can't get used to his fluctuating power spikes when in or out of his crystal spires. Furthermore, because Gnar transforms involuntarily, enemy teams who are smart can just wait out the 15-second duration by staying away from him. As soon as he regresses back into mini mode, they have 5 seconds to fight what is essentially a 5 versus 4.5 since they know Gnar can't transform again right away. Other top laners like Renekton can enter a fight at 0 Fury and generate it very quickly by pressing his ultimate. Even after he exhausts his Fury, he doesn't have that cool-off period the way Gnar does. If he's alive, he can always generate more Fury. Gnar can't. And it's not like he's split 50-50 between Mini and Mega. Mini Gnar has only like 30% of his total power budget, while Mega Gnar has 70%. Not a very pleasant experience when more than half of your strength is gated behind something you can't directly control. The average player would rather play someone who can engage whenever they want to, even if that engage isn't as strong as Gnar's. I suppose if we continue the comparison between top laners, you have Malphite, Wukong, Ornn, Kennen, Zac even. They may not be as strong as Gnar, but they can threaten a dive at any point. One more thing to consider is that just as there are moments where you're Mini Gnar and really wish you had Mega, there are also moments where you transform into Mega Gnar when you don't want to. Mega Gnar's form can sometimes be a downgrade in certain situations, even though it's supposed to be the stronger of the two, as some champions are actually more equipped to deal with Mega Gnar than they are Mini Gnar, tying back to the whole issue of having no agency in when or where he gets to transform, unlike other shapeshifters. Having an ultimate ability doesn't always compensate for this, regardless of if it's a super ultimate. I know I said Mini Gnar's entire purpose is to build rage for Mega Gnar, but there are scenarios where you want to remain on a slippery hidden runner. Mini Gnar has a much better disadvantage state than Mega Gnar, kiting enemies while running away from them using Hyper's movement speed and the slow from his boomerang. He also just has a better neutral game. When you transform, you become bigger so you're easier to hit, slower so you don't run away as easily, and your neutral game gets a bit worse, since unlike the boomerang, the boulder doesn't return to you. Mega Gnar is a very dangerous opponent to deal with, but he's not invincible. He's very reliant on landing that CC chain to land all his other moves, given Q and W have long cast time. But if hypothetically you're facing an Olaf who can ignore CC, or Mordekaiser who can go toe-to-toe with Mega Gnar, transforming turns an otherwise winning matchup into a losing one. The appeal of shapeshifters is that while you should use both their range and melee form, there's no rule saying you have to. If the situation doesn't favor going melee, you can just stay in range and poke that way. Gnar doesn't have that luxury. Enemy teams with a good disengage like a Janna or Tristana can just punt you away the moment you try to go in. Suddenly, all your pressure is gone and you have no way of re-engaging once you blow your crunch. In this case, being a speedy mini Gnar might do more for your team. Several years ago, that was actually the encouraged route. Pro players used to build on hit effects on Gnar back when you saw AD Kennen, AD Teemo, and whatnot. They realized Mega Gnar was too committal and it was safer to itemize towards your mini form for that extra damage. Throughout the years, Riot has been trying to increase the power spike of Mega Gnar so as to make the trade-off less noticeable. Version 9.6 lowered Wallop's cooldown from 15 to 7 seconds to a flat 7 at all ranks. 9.8 reduced Gnar's ultimate cooldown by a whopping 50 seconds at max rank. Then in 9.24b, they boosted the AD ratio of Boulder Toss to 140% and the base damage on Wallop. Then in 10.4, they increased Gnar's base movement speed so that Mega Form wouldn't be too slow, and the ultimate got more bonus AD scaling. Then in 10.9, they increased the cooldown refund from Boulder Toss, letting you cast it more often, as well as the base damage from Crunch. Then in version 11.1, they boosted the damage and slow from Boulder Toss and the dash range on Crunch. So many buffs were given to Mega Gnar to make it more threatening, and it did work, but even with all those, the temporary and telegraphed nature of Mega Gnar makes it way too easy to play around. So in reality, you can only really look at Mini Gnar's performance, bringing me to the final problem that affects his play rate. Gnar's base gameplay offers very little nuance or gameplay satisfaction, spending most of the time keeping a safe distance and playing neutral to chip away at his opponent's health while stacking up rage. Mini Gnar explicitly discourages committal interaction, making the only time where you can actually fight on him being when your opponent is stupid enough to try and engage on you. If you waste your hop to engage first, you're by far one of the weakest champions in the game. So then if you're gonna play a neutral focused hit and runner, there are so many better options. Kennen, Akshan, Vladimir, you can even play Mundo for the Q spam, or Jayce. Speaking of Jayce, a big contributor to shapeshifters being fun to play is how their forms complement one another, having clear rotations or combos that can lead to a very satisfying trade or all-in. Jayce has two standard combos. If he starts in cannon form, he can open with an accelerated shock blast, then use hypercharge to empower his next 3 auto attacks. He then switches to hammer form and uses Q and W, then gets off those 3 autos before swiping them away with thundering blow to prevent counterattack. If he starts in melee form, he does the same QW combo, then E to knock them back, then switches to cannon form and hypercharges 3 autos before finishing them off with an accelerated shock blast, which now does more damage thanks to the armor shred from his transformation buff. Nidalee has the same thing, javelin toss into cougar pounce, swipe, then takedown. Or she can pounce in, swipe and takedown, then swap to human form and snipe them with a long range Q. Rek'sai same thing, Prey Seeker into tunnel, then unburrow followed by Queen's Wrath, Furious Bite, and then Void Rush to finish the job. Point being, Transformers have one or more combos that allow them to seamlessly transition from one form to the other. Since Gnar's transformation is involuntary, they can't really design his mini form to combo into his mega form because he can't transform into Mega Gnar at will, and before you say he can use Hop to transform into Crunch midway through, that's one ability, not a combo. Basically, Mini Gnar and Mega Gnar are two separate entities, preventing them from having a cohesive rotation. You can only ever be a hit and run poking piece of shit, or a hulking bulking kaiju looking ass thingamadoohickey, never in between. Except, the whole point of transformations is to play out their various forms. Aphelios even, you can mix and match 2 weapons together for fancy effects, Calibrum and Gravitum for long range roots, or Severum and Crescendum for machine gun DPS. The entire incentive behind multiforms is to play around those forms. But Gnar is more of an empowered ability caster who can't even use those empowered abilities when he wants to. I often hear people say, oh, why not just make it so Gnar can transform on demand in exchange for making his mega form slightly weaker? At first, I was on board with that. See, a change I initially had in mind was this. Mini Gnar has no ultimate. Maybe what they can do is allow him to transform into Mega Gnar whenever he wants, and however much rage he builds up is however long the transformation will last. We can maintain the cooling off period to make the player decide if they're okay with having Mega Form for only like 5 seconds instead of the max duration. They'll still be locked out of building rage for 15 seconds afterwards, but at least they can utilize Gnar's true power when it matters. It would make for an interesting dynamic, like the whole idea of delayed gratification, the 1 marshmallow now versus 2 marshmallows later. Do you want Mega Form right away that lasts for a short time, or can you hold off on transforming until later and get a longer lasting Mega Gnar? Here's the issue though, Mega Gnar is a diver, and divers are burst oriented. They usually drop all their abilities in quick succession and the job is done. Mega Gnar only really needs like 3 seconds to do all this stuff before players are like, okay, I'm done, we can go back to mini. You can slash his damage in half and it would still be too broken to have on-demand access to his transformation. That's kinda why you can't control it. Now, I am a bit biased though. Part of me is glad that Gnar isn't popular anymore since I hate fighting him in top lane. At the same time, he has a really cool design, so it sucks to see him fall off as much as he did. But what would you guys do if you could fix this issue? Do you think his transformation should be accessible at will, or should it stay reflexive? Let me know in the comments down below. That's gonna be it for today, so if you enjoyed the video, it would be awesome if you could leave a like and subscribe, really helps out the channel. Also, follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Why No One Plays episodes if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon in the next one. Take care.